Here we go. Let's begin. Honorable Dr. Turk, Susanne Frieskaya, Dr. Kallist, Katharina de Albuquerque, dear colleagues, dear friends of the Triple Nexus, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for being part of this festive occasion. Today is the launch of the Joint Operational Framework, WASH Resilience, Conflict Sensitivity, and Peacebuilding, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all here. Like I just said, we will be recording. We do ask you all in the meeting, great that you're here in such great number, to keep your microphones muted. My name is Peter. I'm the director of the German Toilet Organization, and here today as the chair of the German WASH Network, a network consisting of 29 NGOs working in the field of WASH, both humanitarian and development, and that's why we're especially happy today with this event, and I will be your master of ceremonies today. At the very beginning, I do want to thank the German Federal Foreign Office for making this process, the whole process, you'll see and hear about that in a second, of the past years possible, and also this event today. And to give you sort of an impression of that process of the past 2 years, allow me just to skip to a next slide that gives you a short overview. I hope all of you can see the slide now.
هم شو لهم
Yes, okay.
أنا شويه معنا عندي بالكونتاكت هذا هم يحبوا حاجه لا تراسابيليتي لازم كي تقول خدمت لازم توجور دير حاجه ما نلقاكش ما كاش لو تراس تاعك.
I'm getting some assistant in muting. Yeah, now they hear me. Correct? Now I think you hear me again. Okay, excellent. So yes, let me give you a short overview of the history of this initiative, or actually let me even start prior to this initiative. It was in 2019 that we were hosted at UNHCR in Geneva, and we had a meeting bringing together WASH actors. You see the conveners of this meeting here at the left at the top of this event report. And we had this meeting to bring back together for the first time humanitarian and development actors in the field of WASH to discuss how we can better collaborate and make use of our comparative advantages and capabilities. This led to a process on the one hand to include also peace in the discussion, and it led to us becoming a roadmap initiative. When the roadmap was created, the WASH Humanitarian Roadmap 2020 to 25, it was initiated as one of the initiatives within this roadmap, Initiative 3.5 it was called, and as one of the items that that this group felt that should be taken forward was the creation of a joint operational framework for the operationalization of the Triple Nexus. So for this, we had a kickoff event, some familiar faces here today that will play a key role in today's meeting that were also part of that event. So that makes me very happy. And since that time, a quite intensive process has taken place. We had key informant interviews, many of you on the call, perhaps also part of this. We had humanitarian settings where we talked about the initiative as the Global WASH Cluster meeting and satellite events. We had please let other people in. We had development forums like the World Water Week where we presented this initiative, and we went into a range of consultations in the Africa region, later also in the Asia region. For this process, we had many organizations participate as speakers, as input givers during these events. And also as the document was being drafted, we had 45 institutions and more than 60 experts who were reviewing the document, giving their valuable input. And this is what brings us to this event today. So a quick look at the agenda. Those were basically my opening introduction to the event. It's my pleasure to hand over in a second for an opening statement. After that, we have a high-level panel. Some of those individuals we've seen or all of these individuals we've seen at events of ours in the past, and I welcome them all. Then we'll have a brief presentation of the joint operational framework so that we all know what we're talking about. If there are questions, we're happy to answer them. And at the end, we look forward to some sort of outlook. What are next steps? What are commitments single actors are taking, maybe also to inspire others before we close, and hopefully within the hour without any more technical difficulties on the way. So apologies again for sort of the little bit rocky start. So it's with great thanks that I look forward now to the opening words by Susanne Frieskaya. She is the Director of Humanitarian Assistance at the German Federal Foreign Office. And first of all, thank you personally for taking the time to be here with us today, but also to the German Federal Foreign Office for the support that you've given to us to be able to carry out this work and to take this journey, as I've just outlined, from a few years ago all the way to today. So I hand over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Thilo. So, dear High Commissioner, dear Mrs. Albuquerque, dear Katharina, dear Dr. Tindi Mugaya, dear members of the WASH network, and ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Thank you for inviting me to this event, and I'm really honored to open it. And all of you who know Germany a little bit better know that it has always been a focus of our agenda to promote WASH for many years. And I still vividly remember the difficult negotiations on the right to water and sanitation we had in the General Assembly. And that was when we, Katharina, I don't know if you remember, that was when we first met in New York. So in July 2010, the General Assembly finally adopted Resolution 64292, and this was a clear call upon states and international organizations to help in particularly developing countries to provide safe, clean, and accessible and affordable drinking water and sanitation for all. So at that time, this was really a milestone, but if we look at the reality on the ground, it is still a long way to go. So I don't have to explain in front of this audience why sustainable and comprehensive WASH responses are so important. However, I want to highlight why the joint operational framework, which we will launch today, on conflict sensitivity, resilience, and peace building is so important, and why we as Germany have been supporting it. So whenever I travel to countries with difficult humanitarian situations, be it to Yemen, DRC, or recently to Bangladesh, in the refugee camps, but also in other parts of the country, people are often faced still with very precarious WASH installation and facilities. And the already dire situation on the grounds in many countries is exacerbated by climate change. And this is something we cannot deny anymore. If you look, for example, at the Horn of Africa, people are suffering from the absence of 5 rainy seasons in a row. So therefore, sometimes there's not even enough water to drink, let alone for hygiene. So this is a cause of spread of diseases, and again, a vicious cycle. And of course, this is important for us as well, because we have a female foreign and feminist foreign policy, that all those events that that women and other groups with specific needs are, of course, especially affected. For example, if there is a lack of proper menstrual hygiene products, of course, female students remain absent from school. They stay at home. And this brings me to the question, what does this new joint operational framework have to do with all these multifaceted needs? And I want to point out 4 things that I believe are especially important. So the first one is the inclusiveness. So gender equality and disability inclusion need to be part of any of our responses. Then secondly, there is the coherence. So responses need to encompass all the levels of the system, from the policymakers up to the meaningful inclusion of the local actors. The third thing is the interoperability. It is important to spell out how different actions on the ground with regard to development, cooperation, stabilization, and humanitarian assistance can be better coordinated. This is something we're talking about for a long time. So we really have to operationalize it. And then there is the 4th point, and this is kind of the 4th leg of the nexus. We have to try our best to see how we can prevent and mitigate the consequences of climate change. And so this new operational framework does not reinvent WASH interventions. Rather, it brings together a wealth of learning and experience from different partners, as you pointed it out, Thilo, and it brings together and puts together a quite compact and quite usable guideline. And this will hopefully help actors on the ground to ensure a comprehensive and a quite sustainable approach. And the framework provides practical guidance. And this is so important because whenever I asked partners on the grounds to explain to me why the nexus is so difficult to achieve, there were really no clear answers. And there are, of course, several reasons. Too often we see silos instead of collaboration, we have friction loss instead of synergies, and fracturing of services instead of logical follow-up. So what does we do better now with the operational framework? So just a few examples. So first, there's the strong focus on anticipatory action and forecast-based financing. And this is something Germany is really strongly committed to. The second one is a strong localization component, also very important because such it can strengthen local markets and community engagement and should be an integral part of assistance on the ground. And last but not least, the focus on climate-related challenges across the nexus. So these measures are not nice to have. Let me be really clear here, because this is really a prerequisite given the rising needs and the shrinking funding. And this is why we support this network, because we think it is really necessary to operationalize the nexus on the ground as well with regard to WASH. And I very much applaud those who have put countless of hours, as I know, to in this work, and it is now condensed in 50 pages, still a lot, but given the enormous amount of work before us, it's still a condensed one. So it should not be another piece of paper gathering dust on our shelves. We should really use it. And I thank everybody who worked on this so hard very much. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. I will not be able to stay all the time, but my colleague is there, and thank you very much, and hope to work with you on this as well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanne. Great to, on the one hand, have you explain Germany's position on this, but also giving it sort of your personal twist of what you think is important. Thank you so very much for those opening words. That's great for setting the scene now for our panel discussion, which is the next point that we'll go over to. Thank you so much for taking the time. So now it's my honor to introduce our high-level panel. Like I said, some of these have been, or all of these have been involved in our events in the past. 2 years ago, when we had sort of the kickoff of this, Honorable Dr. Danilo Turk was also here. Happy to welcome you here again today. the lead political advisor at Geneva Water Hub, and a former chair of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace, as well as the former president of Slovenia. Thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you here. Then we have Dr. Kalist Tindimugaya, Commissioner at the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda, Directorate of Water Resources Management. We had the pleasure of meeting personally again in Stockholm not all too long ago. Great to have you here today with us, and thank you also for your participation in the consultations that we've had in the past. And last but definitely not least, an old friend, Susanna also hinted at, the sector knows her well in the past as being the special rapporteur on the human rights to water and sanitation, but now in her role as CEO of Sanitation and Water for All Partnership, Katarina de Albuquerque.
هذا المتخصصة في البيئة المياه والصرف الصحي، وهذا حق المياه.
We have someone we need to mute, so let's do that. And then, yes, welcome to this discussion. Let me begin with Dr. Turk. Like I said, you were here 2 years ago. I highlighted that our initiative began with humanitarian and development actors coming together. And then one of the first outcomes when we first met and came together was that many people at the table said, we are missing peace. Yeah, we have to include peace. Otherwise, the triple nexus is not complete. That's the way it should be. But many humanitarian and development watch actors at the beginning were maybe a bit overwhelmed and skeptical about complicating an issue that already for them to collaborate is complicated enough. So from your standpoint, could you please help explain to everyone again why you feel WASH plays such a central role for peace building and for our discussion here today?
Thank you, Thilo, for the introduction, and congratulations to all participants for having put together this very useful and very promising document. I'm speaking on behalf of Geneva Water Hub, which has been focusing on the complex relationship between water and peace for a number of years now. And of course, we have always supported the approach which has now taken shape in this operational framework, joint operational framework. Now, I'm grateful to Susanne Fries-Geyer, who has given us a very good conceptual framework for our discussion in the panel. And what I would like to add are basically two things. First, water is the main medium of climate change. And with climate change becoming such a defining factor of the global situation in every respect, including peace, we have to pay particular attention to water, and particularly in a practical way as suggested by the joint operational framework. Secondly, it is important to look into situations or understand the situations as they arise, and they arise before any conflict starts and before humanitarian problems erupt. Very often the water resource management problems exist from earlier on, and very often they are expressed in aggressive competition among alternative water providers or water users. And we have to see the seeds of problems sufficiently early. Only with the assistance of development actors we can do that. And of course, experience of humanitarians, experience of water specialists will help. We don't have to look for examples very far. I mean, this time we see the ongoing regional crisis in the Sahel region, where obviously everything has to do with water, from the problems, the war in Darfur years ago, to Liptako Gurma more recently, and to more current problems that we see. Therefore, I think it is important precisely to bring all these actors together within an operational and credible framework. What I would like to conclude with, because I understand we have very little time for contributions from the panel members, is that now we have to make sure that there is continuity, that there is continuous work in that regard, and that the focuses are appropriate. But we may come back to this question later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Turk. And thank you very much for the Geneva Water Hub in playing such an important role also in the development, because we did not have the same amount of peace actors at the table as others. So thank you very much for that important role. Dr. Callist, taking into account what Dr. Turk just explained, I think Uganda is a perfect example, and it inspired, in fact, parts of the document of the Joint Operational Framework. And we're grateful to also the contributions that you made, like I said, being speaker at several of our events in the past. And do you agree with Dr. Turk's view? And can you please give us a flavor of what potentials you see for the triple nexus through your work in Uganda?
Thank you very much, and nice being here. I work for the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda, and we're happy to be part of this launch for the framework. Indeed, the Nexus has been key in enabling us to respond to the refugee crisis in Uganda through provision of water, sanitation, and hygiene services. Previously, only humanitarian agencies were providing services to refugees, but we did realize that we needed to bring all the actors together, to bring the humanitarian, development, and peace actors together so that we can coordinate our efforts, build synergies, and also leverage the available resources. So right now in Uganda, provision of water, sanitation, and hygiene services is being done in a coordinated manner for the refugees and host communities. In Uganda, we developed a water and environment refugee response plan, which brings all these actors together. We coordinate the planning, coordinate the implementation, and we have also been able to put together the structures from the national level, the regional level, the local level, where all the actors come together and collaborate. We have also been able to ensure that we improve ownership by the refugees and host communities, and also ensure that operation and maintenance of these services actually is transferred from humanitarian agencies to operators at the national level so that we can ensure sustainability. So we're already practicing it. What we only need to do is now to scale it up and ensure that it is utilized across the board. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Callist, for outlining how you're undertaking this important work at different levels. And thank you also for your political leadership in this regard, which is a perfect segue, I think, to our next panelist, to Katarina. Thank you also to Sanitation Water for All for the work that you've contributed in the past years to this document. And as Dr. Callist just said, it needs different thinking. As I complimented him, it needs political will. SWA is about supporting countries, and I think galvanizing a political will for WASH. And it'd be great to hear from you. How can this be leveraged for the triple nexus? Katarina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Thilo, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's of course a great pleasure to see many friendly faces in front of me, and of course, Susanna. I remember those early days when we were working on the recognition of the human rights to water and sanitation, and obviously I'm always happy to recall the key role that Germany and Spain have been playing way before 2010 towards the recognition of these rights. And at the heart of the work that I'm still doing at SWA and that all the partners are doing is the full realization of the rights to water and sanitation. And this, I think what is also important to say, and as I was listening to Dr. Turk, I was also thinking about it, the human rights obligations that are entailed in the rights to water and sanitation, they apply regarding of the context, be it war or peace, crisis, or independently or regardless of the level of development. They are always there and state have always the obligation to respect, to protect, and to fulfill these rights. And I fully agree regarding what Dr. Turk was saying in terms of the early signs that we must pay attention to. And of course, development actors play a major role. Well, human rights advocates the same, right? National human rights commissions or ombuds people, they receive complaints regarding issues that relate to competing uses of water. For example, I had such a case when I was rapporteur, for example, in Costa Rica. Okay. We also know that a significant number of people live in fragile contexts, and all over the world, also as Dr. Turk was saying, climate change put millions more at risk. Thus, the SDG promise of leaving no one behind must include priority attention to crisis settings, to situations of conflict. Otherwise, we will never get there by 2030. We work at SWA inter alia in reaching to the highest levels of decision makers, and I will talk a little bit more about it. I know we don't have much time. With ministers, but also with heads of state and heads of government, because we think that political will is indispensable, right from determination and the vision, but also the funding, the capacity, the technology, etc. And when political will is there, these other elements that are indispensable to realizing the rights will flow. One example on how SWA is working in this area is our work in the Sahel region. For example, at the margins of the UN Water Conference last March in New York, we brought together ministers, sector ministers from all countries of the Sahel region, together with some development partners, including development banks, but also bilateral agencies, as the German government or the French government. And we had negotiated with the government a declaration on water, sanitation, and hygiene, and the declaration which they signed at the meeting. And the declaration recognizes that access to water and sanitation is critical for maintaining peace, and commits to continued access to water and sanitation in crisis settings. And we have developed an action plan for the implementation of this declaration, which is helping to maintain momentum, ensure coordinated action from improved access across the region. Finally, we are also working now with heads of state and heads of government, and launched in, Thilo was mentioning Stockholm, and launched in Stockholm the heads of state initiatives, which are a global movement aimed at bringing together heads of state, heads of government that want to undertake initiatives at the national level. So it's not just about going to global conferences and expressing their dedication to water and sanitation. It's about making a change at country level. So we are partnering now with UNICEF and IRC WASH, but also the government of the Netherlands, but are also already starting new partnerships with other governments. We have 11 countries that are working right now on heads of state initiatives. And we think that the initiatives are critical because they can be endorsed or taken up by countries that are living in a scenario of crisis, humanitarian emergencies, and even armed conflict. So we think that this framework will allow us to bring together the right actors from the different areas, development, humanitarian, and peace, and it will allow us to work together towards a clear pathway that transcends temporary projects. And I will stop here. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Katarina. And I think what unifies the statements is that we're saying this needs to be applied, this needs to be used. And so my second round of questions, I'd like to focus more in that direction. So maybe to Dr. Turk, also from the view of a political leader, what do you think, what would you suggest to us now that we have this document, and particularly regarding to peace, what platforms in the peace pillar should we make use of? How can we bring countries on board? Which alliances do you recommend? Lots of questions, but maybe you could give us a flavor of what you think is the most useful thing for us to do.
First of all, I'd like to say the importance of the fundamental message. And that message is water is precious, and water needs to be spared and shared. That's the key message which this joint framework could project, and it should project it persistently, because sooner or later everybody will rally around that. I mean, it may take a bit of time, but this will be something that's necessary to put in the forefront. Secondly, it's very important that the action does not shy away from the most intractable places, because water crises tend to be most dramatic in places which are most difficult to handle anyway. And there is a need for a vanguard role of water activists who are not only technical people, they have an important mission, the mission of protecting precious water, which needs to be spared and shared. And therefore, I'm not going to talk about specific situation, but Sahel was already mentioned and as an area, a large area where various problems have to be addressed. And I would go as far as to speak also about Ukraine at some point. I mean, it's not ripe now. This is not the moment to do it, but it is already time to think about it and try to figure out what would work. And then finally, my third point, of course, there are important bodies where we have to bring our action to the attention of decision makers. One of them is UN Security Council. Let us not neglect that body, which is not in a good reputation right now, but it is always there, it's always important, and it has dealt with issues of peace and climate change already, and we'll have to deal with it more and more. So it's important that the perspective of WASH is brought into the picture early on. And of course, that perspective also has a normative aspect, which must always be there. I mean, human rights must be there. The international law dealing with water cooperation has to be there. And that is possible to put in a single set of message in a country-specific way whenever necessary. But of course, the important thing is point of departure, which we now have, and the readiness not to shy away from the most intractable situations. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Turk. Also one of the messages that our German WASH network always tries to convey. Thank you for that statement. Dr. Callist, maybe from your perspective, country perspective, how do you intend to use or disseminate, hopefully, the JOF? We'd love to hear what your plans are in this regard, if you have any.
Thank you very much. I think, as been mentioned, that achieving an nexus is not easy. I think what we need to do is to ensure that people get to appreciate the benefit of the joint framework. And as we have already piloted it and we're already using it in Uganda, we intend to ensure that as many people as possible get to know the benefits and how actually can help leverage resources, ensure that we avoid duplication and achieve the objective of sustainable provision of water and sanitation services. Again, recognizing that we are faced with the challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, we need to bring all these players together so that we can have climate resilient food services. So in Uganda, we have been having monthly webinars. Right now, every Friday of the month, we have webinars where we share online with everybody. So we want to ensure that this framework is actually brought to the attention of people within Uganda, but people from outside Uganda can also connect. So every last Friday of the month, within our Water Resources Institute, we organize monthly webinars. So this is one area in which we want to ensure that we disseminate this, and we will be coming over to you to work with us to ensure that this is done. We also organize dialogues on specific issues. And this is one area where we can organize a dialogue involving the members of parliament, the different government agencies, the private sector, the civil society, and academia and all the stakeholders. We also organize trainings, and I think we need to build the capacity and use of this framework. I think we can come up with some short trainings, organize trainings to meet the needs of the people, but also we organize the Uganda Water and Environment Weekend March, where we plan to have a session to discuss the framework and the benefits of the triple nexus and how people can actually take advantage of it. And through that arrangement, we're also able to reach other countries within the region. We collaborate with them through regional economic communities, Lake Victoria Basin Commission, East Africa Community. So we have many mechanisms through which we can actually disseminate this and look forward to working with a number of partners that have been part of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Callist, for that clarification on what you plan to do. And as we discussed in Stockholm, more than happy to collaborate with you on sort of the webinars and other trainings that you're thinking about carrying out. Thank you very much. So, Katarina, the Nexus is not only about collaboration and coherence, but also about using comparative advantages. And from the start, it seemed that humanitarians were very, very eager in, I think, also helping to work on this nexus to relieve the burden of humanitarian needs with the bigger development sector. Can you give us an insight from the sort of the development side into what steps SWA has undertaken in the past years, and perhaps, yeah, what you're planning as the next steps to engage more with the nexus thinking to complement this initiative? Thank you.
Thank you, Tilo. Okay, so I will say two things. I show 4 fingers. I say, so I'm already lying, right? I say, so okay. 2 things. I want to say 2 things. During the COVID period, SWA brought its partners together to do a global leaders call to action on COVID and water, sanitation, and hygiene. We managed to have 14 heads of state signing it, as well as several heads of UN agencies, etc. Also endorsing it. And we managed to publish it in the New York Times, in Le Monde, El País, the Deutsche Zeitung, etc. So we think, and now if you ask me, does this solve all the problems of the world? No, it doesn't, obviously. For me, it's just a spark. And we then incentivize our ministers to use it to go and talk with their heads of state that had signed the call to action. Because in many countries, what our ministers were telling us was there are these intergovernmental committees on COVID being created, money allocated, and the water minister is not being invited to the discussions, is not receiving a slice of the funding. So they use the global call to action in order to put pressure on the heads of state and government. Okay, I'm coming back to heads of state and government. And I was thinking now, listening to all of you, and I didn't prepare this, and I didn't have this idea before coming here, is this something that we can think of also in this space, in this nexus space? Is this something that could light a spark? What have we been doing? Throughout the last year, this year, we have been, we focus on how our partners, when I say SWA, I'm talking of 400 partners, 85 governments, civil society, regulators, private sector, academic institutions, UN agencies, international finance institutions. How can we use them to work? How can we work on these matters with them? So we did a scoping study, and through the scoping study, we spoke not only with our partners, but also we had targeted interviews with non-SWA actors working in humanitarian contexts and on the peace angle. And we see what we heard was that these actors thought, number one, that we could support SWA with high-level political advocacy with the highest possible decision makers, and B, that we could be used for our convening power, because we are the sum of our partners, as I was saying before. So bringing together stakeholders from across the different groups that I mentioned and pushing them to make smart commitments to work towards concrete results in a framework of accountability is something that we could also contribute to. So we envisage more consultations about this in the coming month, and we are confident that okay, I don't know if I made a mistake. Okay, and we are confident that in the months to come, in the weeks to come, there will be more to discuss with you, and I hope there are good things or great things even that we can do together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Katarina, also to you. And it's great that new ideas are coming out as we're discussing here, because that's also what today and your discussion was supposed to do amongst yourselves even and with the participants. So I'll just be short because of time, but thank you very, very much, Dr. Turk, Dr. Callist, Katarina, for the wonderful input that you have given. Thank you very much. Round of applause, please. Thank you so much. So this leads us with a drum roll to the unveiling of the document. At this point, it would be my great honor to welcome Tim Grief, who unfortunately can't be here today for unforeseen reasons, but I do want to thank him explicitly. He's the main author of this publication, consultant of the German WASH Network, who deserves the biggest thank you for all the work that he has done. But I also do want to thank the co-leads of Initiative 3.5, namely Omar El Hattab and Jamal Shah from UNICEF, Angie Saleh from Sanitation Water for All Partnership, and Monica Ramos as Global WASH Cluster Coordinator, who sat with us in monthly calls discussing this document, how we take it forward, the different events that we had, and so on. So thank you to all of you, as well as to the interview partners, speakers, participants, and the many reviewers that were part of this. All of that culminates at the end of our publication. You see on the screen, the title page. It culminates on the back page, where now many of the contributors to this initiative, to this publication, have decided to show their logos to basically say, we're part of this, we're committed to the spirit of this document and taking it forward. And so, we send our big thank yous also to these organizations, send our regards, as I said, to Tim Grief, who can't be here, but it's my pleasure to introduce Johannes Rück, probably the person who spent the second most time on this document. He's the coordinator of the German WASH Network, and I hand over to him to give us an insight into the document. Thank you.
Okay, welcome to all of you. Yeah, thank you, Tito. Really too bad that Tim can't here with us, as he would deserve to present the JOF. It was really hard work to pull this important piece together, and I'm sure he would love to see how it is received by you. He was already mighty proud to see the many logos of organizations who support the JOF. Now it's my pleasure to present you the framework. I promise I won't give a lengthy presentation. Very soon we will share the link with you, and you will have the chance to discover it on your own. I will present what the JOF is, its purpose, how it can be applied, for whom it is and where it is relevant. And first I start with the layout. It's a user-friendly and practical document. So the JOF sets out the thinking. Section 2, please mute yourself. A theory of change in section 3, and key steps for putting the Nexus approach into praxis within the WASH sector, along with establishing strong linkages with the integrated water resource management sector, which is section 4. The JOF provides additional tools and resources, a glossary of terminology, links to key guidance and tools. published by actors of the wash sector, and also brief case studies relating to strengthening resilience, conflict sensitivity, and peace-building capacities. The word joint emphasis the collaboration required between the different pillars and actors. The word operational hints at the suggested practical steps and entry points for policymakers, but also practitioners. As such, the JOF is not a new WASH program or a coordination guideline or platform. The JOF is designed primarily for humanitarian development collaboration. However, where feasible and relevant, the nexus should be extended to include the additional participation of the peace pillar. The JOF is not a detailed guidance, which has to be strictly followed, but has been designed to be easily adapted by users for their own WASH programming, their own guidance notes and tools. So it should be complementary. So what are the drivers for action? So we heard already a lot, and I don't need to tell you, climate change, conflict, water insecurity, they are all rapidly accelerating the number and magnitude of protracted and recurrent crises globally. Water insecurity and water-related ecosystem degradation resulting from mismanagement, overuse, pollution, conflict, climate change, of course, ranked under the top 5 risks of global economic, social, and political instability, according to the World Economic Forum. Progress towards access to WASH services and safe community behaviors is severely off track, especially in countries prone to recurrent and protracted crises. Exposure and vulnerability to shocks and stresses exacerbate water insecurity, the severe lack of WASH services, the mismanagement of water resources, and the loss of water-related ecosystems. There is a huge finance gap, especially for resilient WASH systems in both development cooperation and humanitarian assistance. Development financing is about 60 billion per year for fragile states. So that is nearly half of the annual demand, which of course the world does not meet at the moment. The global funding rate for humanitarian WASH needs dropped from 48% to 90% between the period of 2014 and 2021. So, but what we see throughout the whole process and the consultations, the talks about many programs and projects is collaboration between silos is possible. In the long term, closer collaboration effort is the only way we will achieve sustainable development goals and leave no one behind, called Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, in 2022. There are several principles that humanitarian and development actors share, along with elements of conflict sensitivity and peace building, thus providing common ground and a strong foundation for collaboration, effective coordination, coherence across all programming phases. Collaboration between silos is possible, as the pink diagram demonstrates. There are more principles that bring us together than drive us apart. These are localization, do no harm, the human rights-based approach, or the principle of humanity, gender equality, leave no one behind, strengthening accountability, sustainable development, and of course, resilience. So what is the purpose of the JOF? The purpose is to improve WASH system performance by strengthening resilience, conflict sensitivity, and peace-building capacities. Peace-building is, as I said, recommended where feasible and relevant. The term WASH systems can be broadly defined as an effective network of people and the system of which they are part of, operating together to deliver WASH services. This will enable WASH systems to anticipate and absorb disasters. So if you look here at the graphic, minimize negative impacts on WASH system performance, which is the red area in the diagram. For example, from the perspective of building resilience, strengthening the local preparedness and emergency response capacity of a WASH service provider to ensure business continuity in times of crisis. Prevent and adapt to disasters. Maximize WASH system performance, which is the green area in the diagram. For example, from the perspective of building conflict sensitivity. Undertaking a conflict analysis, even a very basic one, can help WASH organizations understand conflict dynamics within the community and adapt accordingly, especially regarding the allocation of water and energy resources. So the JF, why, for whom, and where? Why? To reduce people's unmet needs, risks, and vulnerabilities within the context of the WASH sector, increase their resilience, minimize harm, and build peace where possible. For whom? For policymakers, directors, coordinators, practitioners within governments, civil society, private sector, UN agencies, bank donors, academia, so all constituencies. And where it is it is relevant from the regional or transboundary to the national, subnational, and local levels in recurrent and protracted crisis system. Transboundary is equally relevant as water-related ecosystems, disease transmission, pandemics, migrants, refugee flows are often a transboundary challenge. So, making the WASH nexus work requires programmatic approaches and WASH nexus operational principles. The key programmatic approaches in the JOF are risk-informed, system strengthening, and conflict sensitivity and peace building. You will find in section 3 of the document a complete theory of change, which explains how these approaches can be applied to strengthening resilience capacities in the WASH system. The suggested outputs in this theory of change are grouped by the 5 SWA building blocks and translate into pillar outcomes: humanitarian assistance, development, cooperation, and peace. The nexus operational principles are listed on the slide and are key to managing the WASH nexus in challenging environments. I will elaborate on 3 of them. First of all, work together to deliver. Working together to deliver is core to making the nexus of humanitarian development and peace work. Where feasible and relevant, WASH actors should work jointly across all coordination and programming activities, including the project cycle, from assessments to analysis, planning, delivery, monitoring, review, and of course, financing. Strengthening accountability and inclusion. The second one, strengthening systems of accountability, ensuring community engagement and feedback mechanisms are developed, and addressing inclusion and marginalization in access to and management of WASH services. Finally, develop rapid transition mechanism as a final example. Developing rapid and effective transition mechanisms between crisis phases. For example, humanitarian actors in consultation with development actors to focus on sustainability right from the start of an emergency response, building on existing water resources, WASH systems, and markets, traditional knowledge, etc. And finally, the JOF presents in section 4 the key steps to putting the JOF into practice. This section outlines how to put the WASH nexus approach into practice through a series of key steps. Within each step, policymakers and practitioners are provided with key entry points and actions that are linked with country processes and coordination structures, UN processes, commonly operating in protracted and recurrent crisis context. Additionally, connections are made to the outcomes, outputs, and approach outlined in the theory of change section. So yeah, this was my presentation. I hand over back to Thilo, and I will now share for you the document in the chat. So have fun reading, enjoy.
Thank you very, very much, Johannes. And it's encouraging that even as we were, yes, applause. Thank you, Andrea. And it's encouraging that even as we're speaking, people are still joining the meeting and coming in to hear about this. I will, for those that weren't here at the beginning, we had technical difficulties at the beginning with a computer crash, and hence I'll be very short here. If there are questions, please do type them into the chat and we'll respond afterwards. I'm sorry, we'll have to at least cut that part, because at the end, what we wanted were some short statements. We made it open to partners who committed their logo or who are a big part of this initiative, to maybe make short statements how they intend to use the JOF going forward. So I'll be very quick in my introduction. First, Marc-André Bünzli, if you're there, if we didn't lose you to technical difficulties, from SDC, where you're the head of... Okay, Claudio, I was hearing.
Yeah, Thilo, this is Joda Serrano,
yes,
the head of the WASH Roadmap Secretariat. Unfortunately, Marc-André couldn't make it, then Claudio is now unwell, so you've got me as a last-minute person, so forgive me if I'm not quite on message. But you know, so I'm head of the Secretariat for the WASH Roadmap. We've been in existence since 2019. Initiative 3.5, the initiative to develop a joint operating framework, was prioritised right from the start. As we've said before, you know, co-led by 4 organisations who are working very collaboratively in order to make this happen, and 10 other organisations who also supported in that. And I think even through your presentations here, the collaborative effort, the joint element of it has been, you know, one of the key successes of this. As I said, it has been prioritised. There was a prioritisation amongst all of the 16 initiatives, and actually the donors at the outset were the ones that said, absolutely, you know, looking at WASH within the Triple Nexus is something that we want to take forward. We're incredibly pleased at the WASH Roadmap at the success of this initiative, and very much looking forward to it being rolled out. We have an immense amount of actors who participate in the WASH Roadmap, and they will all be very much involved in implementing and taking this forward. So we want to wish every success to the Joint Operating Framework. Thank you very much for being part of the WASH Roadmap and for your work. Good luck in the future.
Thank you, Joe, for stepping in regards to the co-leads of the roadmap, the co-chairs. And you alluded to the committed co-leads of Initiative 3.5. One of them is here now, Omar, from UNICEF, where he's Senior Advisor for Water, Sanitation, Hygiene in the Emergency Division. Omar, over to you.
Thank you so very much, Thilo, and a very good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Very quickly, you know, there is a global increase in the number of states in fragility. This year it's 60 compared to 57 a couple of years ago. As we speak, 1.9 billion people live in fragile states, which account for about a quarter of the world's population, yet nearly 3/4 of the world's extremely poor. And the projection is that people living in fragile states will increase to 2.2 and 3 billion by 2030 and 2050, respectively. You know, in 2022, there were 170 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. If memory serves, 6-7 years ago, this figure was about half of that or so. Quite frankly, the world can no longer withstand those large-scale emergencies, and we need a paradigm shift in order to stem the decline that we witnessed during emergency. This can only be advanced through strengthening sector resilience. And by resilience, a resilient sector is a sector that can absorb or withstand the shock, continue delivering during the shock, and bounce back or adapt afterwards. Sector resilience can be advanced through managing the risks across the 5 SWA WASH sector building blocks, which will revolve around the sphere of stress testing the building blocks. Be those climate shocks, human-made, natural hazards, and so forth. And clearly, this is not about preparedness. Preparedness is part of it, which deals with the residual risk, but it's a different paradigm shift here. It's against that backdrop that UNICEF is developing for the sector the Global WASH Sector Resilience Index. The idea is to develop a global map giving countries where we operate in with color coding for comparability, the reds, the oranges, yellows, and so forth, based on the resilience of the WASH sector in each of those states. This will be a critical tool for informing decisions, guiding investments, and help prioritize. That apart, it's really important to ensure that all WASH programs, at least an absolute minimum, do no harm by being conflict sensitive, and potentially do more good by contributing to peace building. It's against that backdrop that we have developed, finalized on behalf of the sector, the WASH for Peace guidelines and tools for the WASH sector, and it addresses water as a shared resource and WASH as a basic social service, and this will be launched shortly. For the Global WASH Sector Resilience Index, it's work in progress, and hopefully we will have it towards the end of the year. I'll leave it there. The floor is back to you, Zilo. Over.
Thank you very much, Omar. And the peace guidance of which you spoke is also referenced in the document, as we were obviously aligning with each other, aware of each other's work as this was going forward. Jeske Verhoeven, IRC WASH, you're a capacity development expert there, and I know you had lengthy discussions, I think, with Johannes recently. You manage the WASH Systems Academy, and I think for us, we look forward to collaborating with you in the future. So over to you.
Hi, good morning, afternoon to everybody. So IRC very much supports the Joint Operational Framework, and we very much look forward to working together with everybody to making its content really accessible and to stimulating its use and uptake of the Joint Operational Framework by creating a free self-paced and guided online course on the WASH Systems Academy that can be accessed by all, that will be fun and interactive and really help with the next step in making it accessible and stimulating its use. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Very specific, but that'll be a big contribution. Thank you so much. So we go to Guillaume Pierre-Humbert from ICRC, Head of Water and Habitat Unit there. I'm happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Thilo. And so as armed conflicts have become increasingly protracted and are affecting cities, this means that large number of people are suffering from lack of development and deterioration of essential services, leading to serious public health hazards. For the ICRC, the humanitarian development nexus became a necessity to find durable solutions for water and sanitation services already years ago. In 2015, we published the results of our reflections in our urban services during protracted conflict report. And then, in collaboration with UNICEF and the World Bank, to unpack what it means concretely when humanitarian and development actors join forces to build the resilience of water and sanitation services, a second report was published. I will share the link with to both reports in the chat box after I finish this intervention. And so in parallel, we'll also launch projects, for example, in Goma, Congo, or Mosul in Iraq, where we started to work hand in hand with authorities, service providers, and development actors, including SIDA, the Swiss Development Corporation, the World Bank, the French Development Agency, and others. Nowadays, we have a portfolio of more than 10 large-scale projects around the world, which are suited for partnerships beyond development and humanitarians that goes well beyond funding and primarily going towards getting the specific knowledge and expertise from all sides to support effectively local service providers. It is critical to have this increased collaboration and exchange happening systematically, in particular at a time when the humanitarian funding is reducing. Eventually, ICRC doesn't want to do development, but we want developers to be where they should be. And while ICRC is always cautious to engage with peace actors due to our mandate, we are convinced that access to safely managed water and sanitation services is an essential foundation for peace. This framework will help to mainstream this type of approaches. So let's follow these practical principles, and please count on ICRC to do its best to lead by example. And to finish, I would like to thank the German WASH Network for their leadership in that domain, and in particular, Tim and Johannes for this excellent piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words of thanks, and return to you and to all the others that participated. in this process. Thank you for those statements at the end. If someone else wants to add their commitments in the chat, please do so. I'm very aware that we went over time due to sort of the technical difficulties at the beginning, but I think it speaks for this group and the people who are engaging in this topic that they're so committed, because the participant number has not really dropped even if we went over time. You saw the list of logos at the back of the publication. I just saw in the chat that Malteser International, for example, although we had their logo, didn't end up there. That will be corrected immediately, and hence a shout out to Malteser International. You receive a special mention at this point. So hopefully that makes up for it. And same goes for other organizations that want to show this type of commitment. I think what we'll do as a next step, the initiative 3.5 will open more for dialogue to other actors. I think as a step coming out of this JOF, we want to work with this committed group, to really align. Different organizations are doing different things that can complement each other in such an important way, and to be aware of what others are doing and to properly align our work, be coherent in this effort, and is exactly what is needed. So thank you to everyone here today. Thank you again for the Federal Foreign Office, the German Federal Foreign Office, for making this all possible, and to our excellent speakers that we had today and panelists. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And feel free to unmute yourself and say goodbye in your own language, and enjoy the reading. All the best to all of you.